Governor Pence was born and raised in Columbus, Indiana. He's always been a proud Hoosier. Hoosiers have been important to him, but he also is proud of his Irish roots. His grandfather came over from Ireland by way of Ellis Island. Governor Pence received a degree in history from Hanover College, and he got his JD from the Indiana University School of Law. His wife was a 25-year educator. She was an art teacher, and I have a special place in my heart for my special people, my art, my music, my library teachers, and we want to make sure that our state continues to have those people in place. He has 3 children, Michael, Charlotte, and Audrey. They're all in college, and 2 of them are in an Indiana college. Education and Hoosier education is what Governor Pence has been about. And I think it's very fitting that he should come here today to present his 2014 agenda for education for our state. Because it was here in our Constitution that we became one of the first, if not the first state, that said in their Constitution that all children in the state of Indiana would receive a free education. I'm very proud of that, and I know Governor Pence is also proud. So let us please give a great Hoosier welcome to the governor, the 50th governor of the state of Indiana. Thank you.
See you. Good to see you. Good to see you, young man. Hi, guys. Thank you. Just great. Thank you, just great. Isn't this neat? Well, let me first begin by giving you all an opportunity to express your appreciation to Representative Rhonda Rhodes for that wonderful introduction. Thank you for your service to the people of Indiana. Thank you for welcoming me here to Indiana's first state capital. Rhonda, it's good to be with you today. Thank you. While this is not a meeting of the Indiana General Assembly, it is also well represented here by others. And join me in welcoming Senator Ron Groom and Representative Lloyd Arnold, who are in this state capitol building. Good to have you both here. And I'm very humbled to be joined by other leaders in this community and from around the region. I'm grateful that Rebecca Reeves, the Outreach Director for the Department of Education, is with us today, and superintendents of Harrison, Crawford, Clark, and Floyd County Schools who are joining us for a conversation about the future of education in Indiana. Make no mistake about it, and it's not just because I'm married to a school teacher the last 28 years. I know that it's the people in the schools that make it happen for our kids. So join me in welcoming all these people working in education in Indiana. I know we're also joined by the chancellors of Ivy Tech and Purdue University, and I'm grateful to see that wonderful leadership here today. And also, lastly, it is great to be flanked by the future here in this historic place. Students from Corydon Central High School, and let me just be clear to the teachers who are here: school is out today due to weather. And all of these kids volunteered to be here. So why don't we give these kids a round of applause for being a part of this. Thank you, guys. Great to be with you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being here in these storied halls. It was mentioned that I was a graduate of Hanover College, which is just down the river from here. And I was an American history major. So I just get goosebumps when I come into places like this. And I couldn't think really of a better venue to really talk about the future of Indiana than in this historic state capitol building. And I want to welcome you all here today. I'm here today really to talk about the future. That is, after all, what education is really all about. We need to work today to do what's necessary for our children to be successful tomorrow. Our fundamental moral obligation as parents, I believe, is the well-being of our children and their preparedness for life after they leave the home. Our moral obligation as policymakers is similar, and that is to ensure that our children in Indiana are learning in a way that prepares them to succeed in the future that they choose. And that's about which I came here today to speak. Let me first say, I think here in Indiana, owing to members of the General Assembly, owing most especially to people in the classroom and in administrative positions of our schools, we should all be we should all be proud, rather, of the progress that we've made in the Hoosier State in recent years. With the support of members of the General Assembly in the last session, we managed to increase our investment for our traditional K-12 schools by nearly $200 million. We provided $30 million in performance funding to reward high-performing schools and teachers. And we expanded our scholarship program for our neediest kids. And our commitment to our kids is paying off. And it's important as we begin this conversation to acknowledge the progress that we've made. I-STEP math and reading scores are up from a 64% passage rate in 2007 to 71.5% last year. Graduation rates are up from about 78% in 2007 to nearly 88% last year. And most notably, in the last several weeks, the nation's report card was released, the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And for math and reading scores, it showed that Indiana's proficiency improvement was the second highest out of all the states in the United States of America. That's progress that we should celebrate. Indiana's fourth graders actually ranked fourth in the nation in average math scores and demonstrated significant improvements in math and reading scores, while eighth graders also showed important overall gains. Men and women, boys and girls, we're making progress in our schools. But the race for excellence is far from over. As we gather here today in this first state capital, the hard reality is that more than 200,000 Hoosier kids still find themselves in underperforming schools. Last year alone, more than 10,000 high school graduates, most of whom had Core 40 with honors diplomas, required remediation when they enrolled in a post-secondary institution. Despite our overall progress on graduation rates and scores, we have schools across the state where dropout rates are far too high and math and reading scores are far too low. That's not only unacceptable, it's not the Indiana way. Hoosiers have a long and storied history when it comes to educating our children. And Representative Rhodes just reflected on that very eloquently. And I want to amplify that for you today because it explains in part the reason why we chose this first state capital as the backdrop for a conversation about the future of education in Indiana. Nearly 200 years ago now, under the giant elm tree that was just up the street, during the hot days of June 18 and 16, Indiana managed to cobble together our first Constitution in these very hallways. And we did become, here in Indiana, the first state in the nation to adopt a constitution calling for free public education for all of our people. And that's worth celebrating as a state and as a people. Hoosiers were forward-thinking back then, and we've once again emerged as a national leader because of a wide range of education reforms that we've been embracing in recent years. Not too many years before Indiana's founders were writing our Constitution in these very hallways. One of our nation's founders, John Adams, wrote memorably, quote, "There are two types of education. One should teach us how to make a living, and the other should teach us how to live." One of his closest allies in the early days of the Revolution, Thomas Jefferson, regarded education as, and I quote, "essential to the preservation of our liberty." Literature from the era of Adams and Jefferson is replete with claims that educating our children is essential to a well-ordered and prosperous republic. Education wasn't about degrees, school corporations, and tests. It was about skills, knowledge, habits that were required for people to lead, prosper, and help their fellow citizens succeed. Today in Indiana, I like to think we understand that point better than most, given the progress that we've made in recent years and our commitment to education. Our recent successes in school reform have really put a focus back in this state on quality, on relevance, and on outcomes in Indiana. We really believe, along with John Adams, that education in Indiana should help young people go on to be successful both in their careers and in their lives. We've made great strides, but I'm here today in this first state capital to say that we cannot rest. Now is the time for us to move from education reform to education innovation in the state of Indiana. And allow me to outline that for you today. Education innovation in Indiana, I believe, should be characterized by a wide range of educational options. The K-12 experience should lead seamlessly to training that provides the best industry certifications or to an affordable college degree, both of which in turn lead to jobs that are in demand in Indiana today. Innovation begins, of course, at the beginning of the continuum. That's why just last week we announced our intention to expand educational opportunities to disadvantaged families in the Hoosier State in the area of early childhood development. Let me say again in these storied hallways, I believe the time has come to extend pre-K education to disadvantaged children in the state of Indiana, once and for all. Last week, we proposed a voucher program targeted to families in need, with strong accountability measures in place to ensure the children are starting kindergarten ready for a life of learning. As we take on that issue, we need to be honest about what the research shows. The results of pre-K education in states that have gone ahead of Indiana in this space are somewhat mixed. Truth of the matter is the general conclusion I've drawn from the literature is that evidence about universal pre-K programs improving outcomes for kids is much thinner than one might think. But early learning programs targeted to at-risk and low-income children can and do work, and I believe that's where Indiana should focus in the days ahead. We need to use 2014 to design a scholarship voucher program for our neediest children so that we can use it as the framework for the 2015 budget session to extend opportunities to young people. Now let me say, just for the record, I will always believe the best pre-K program in Indiana will be a prosperous family that's able to provide their children with the kind of enrichment in the home that they need and deserve. But the hard truth is there, for many children in Indiana, by some estimates more than 40,000 children in our state. That's just not the reality. And I know the heart of the people of Indiana is with those children and with those families, and we will meet this need and extend pre-K opportunities to those needful children. Innovation also goes forward on the continuum of education by focusing on K-12 education. I think the time has come for us to focus on the supply side of education reform, promoting new innovation, new learning methods, new technologies to improve student outcomes. Essential to this effort begins with support for our teachers. I've said it once already, I'll say it again, because it usually scores me points at home. That I'm married to a school teacher. Mrs. Pence graduated with high honors from high school and high honors from university. And she wanted to go to the classroom and nowhere else. She spent most of her years teaching the second grade level and some years as an art teacher. But I'm convinced in all of my heart that for all the reforms that policymakers can enact and all that have been enacted throughout our history, all of them pale in comparison to the impact of one good teacher in the life of one student. And so our policies and proposals in this session, I think, need to be about strengthening and supporting our teachers as they drive innovation in the classroom. We need to do more to make new ideas and innovation a hallmark of Indiana's educational landscape. Too often in our efforts to improve schools, we don't invest enough in our teachers or allow them to lead as reformers. After all, don't need really to be reminded that everyone who teaches in the classroom has dedicated their lives to educating our children. And so we should do more to unleash their creativity and enterprise. That's why we're proposing a new teacher innovation fund that would make grants available to teachers who have the best scalable ideas for improving student outcomes. The fund would include money for teachers to help with classroom supplies so they don't have to dip into their own pockets, as too many do today. And any renaissance in learning in Indiana, I know, will begin in the classroom, in creative and entrepreneurial teachers leading the way. A 2008 study of classroom innovation found that teachers in schools that encourage thinking outside the box use known innovative methods more often to the benefit of their students. I believe if we give teachers more freedom and show that we support innovation, they will do things no one had ever thought of before, and our kids will be the winners as a result. I also believe we should provide additional support for public school teachers in making decisions about where they might like to actually practice their profession of teaching. We proposed just last week a program that we'll take to the General Assembly in this upcoming session. I call it Choices for Teachers. You know, there's been a lot of talk in Indiana about expanding educational choices for parents and for students. And this governor, long before I was your governor, has supported those efforts. But I think the time has come to expand the choices for teachers. And the program that we're proposing would provide a stipend to teachers who apply for and get a job teaching in a low-performing public school or a public charter school serving a high percentage of low-income students. Low-performing schools need the help, and charters typically pay less, and they need the help too. For instance, the average salary difference between a traditional public and public charter school teacher is often more than $12,000 a year. You know, I really do believe teaching is a calling. But I would suspect there are many teachers who have followed their careers and in supporting their families have found themselves teaching in school districts, but from time to time will look off and think maybe there's somewhere else that they could be, that they could make a bigger difference in the lives of children, particularly disadvantaged children. What I want to do is remove the economic disincentive, remove the economic barrier from letting teachers follow their hearts and be in the classroom and in the communities where they feel called to be. And that's what Choices for Teachers is really all about. Now, all these ideas are meant to stir the pot, to make the desire to try new things, to improve student outcomes the norm in Indiana. Why? Well, because we know that highly effective teachers improve student outcomes. All kinds of studies from the 1970s until now have shown this convincingly. Students assigned to effective teachers have shown increases in math and reading scores upwards of 50 percentage points. Highly effective teachers are innovators. We want to encourage greater innovation on a wider scale for more students all across the state of Indiana. Another element of innovation in Indiana is in the delivery of education in our charter schools. Indiana has a proud tradition today, now more than 70 charter schools. We've been leading the way in this area. And through bipartisan support at the local level and at the state level, Indiana's been a recognized national leader in charter schools, which are public schools, and also in holding charter schools accountable. They've been an essential element of the spectrum of innovation in our state. Yet, even though they're public schools, they operate with several disadvantages compared to traditional public schools. One has to do with the fact that traditional public school districts can manage one budget across multiple schools, while charters currently have to budget for each individual school. We'll propose legislation in this session of the General Assembly that would make it possible simply for charter operators with more than one school in Indiana to manage a single budget, rather than several, with the flexibility to move funds between schools as they're needed. This will create a more solid economic foundation and fiscal foundation underneath these innovative public charter schools, and I believe it's an idea whose time has come. Another disadvantage facing charter schools is that they don't receive funds for facilities, which means that they have to take dollars away from salaries and classroom needs to cover rent and building repairs. Well, one way to ease this burden is to make unused public school buildings available to charter schools. Our state's largest school district today spends more than $25 million annually maintaining vacant and underutilized school buildings. Now, we've taken a stab at this problem in the past, but I'm not sure we went about it the right way. So I'm proposing that we form a council a council to design a financing and management plan in 2014 for leasing existing unused buildings to schools that need them. I have in mind a creative approach that was taken in the state of Louisiana in recent years that strengthened their supply of innovative schools by removing a significant barrier to school growth and improvement. Given the fact that charter schools operate according to performance goals, this approach would simplify the process in the unfortunate event that a charter would need to close. It would also benefit the budgets of those districts that are carrying the cost of unused facilities on their books. With more than 6,500 Hoosier students on the waiting list of charter schools across the state of Indiana, we know the demand for charter school education is high, and these proposals are really aimed at helping to meet that demand by making charter school education and the development of charter schools more economically feasible. Another innovative way that we're meeting the demand in the state of Indiana in the continuum of education can be found in our 11 regional works councils that were created through bipartisan legislation that passed the Indiana General Assembly unanimously earlier this year. These business-driven councils are working even as we speak to answer a single question, and that's simply this. On a region-by-region basis, we're asking educators and business leaders to answer the question, what should the career and technical education look like in your community to create effective career pathways for young people who want to work in your community after they finish their education? This is an exciting new project. I'm pleased to report to all of you here today that it is well underway. We have educators working with business leaders in new and in creative ways all across the state of Indiana. But we need, in this upcoming session of the General Assembly, to prepare ourselves for the investments that will be necessary to support the conclusions that are drawn. And to strengthen that effort, I believe we need to better understand how our current career and technical education resources are deployed. So we'll be proposing in this session of the General Assembly an in-depth return on investment assessment on how our career and technical education resources are expended, and including such as vocational college facilities and how they're used in communities across the state, what the partnerships are with secondary education. I believe this analysis will set a foundation for us to leverage partnerships formed by our regional works councils and also identify what resources will be needed to support an expansion of career and technical education in the state of Indiana in the days ahead. And let me say in these times of difficulty in our economy and too often unpredictability in public revenues, I fully contemplate that when we get about to financing these resources, it'll be a public and private partnership. Most of those that are participating in our regional works councils and all of our participants in the Indiana Career Council know that for us to maximize the opportunity that our students will have in expanding career and technical or vocational education, we'll have to partner with industry all over the state of Indiana. There will be a public part, but there will be a private part. And I look forward to developing that framework in the days ahead. Another critical element to education innovation is making sure we don't give up on students who've dropped out of high school and are now looking for a second chance. Again, speaking of that long continuum beginning at pre-K education, now we find ourselves in the heartbreak of when a student has dropped out of high school and given up on their future. Now I want to say, I don't think it's enough simply to ensure that those individuals get a high school equivalency. I believe we should make efforts on an ongoing basis to allow Hoosiers who dropped out of high school to actually get a high school diploma and even pursue an industry recognized certification that equips them to work in jobs with strong potential for upward mobility. That's why we're supporting an expansion of the successful dropout recovery programs that are already operating in our state. The earnings of graduates of what are known as the Excel Centers, operated by Goodwill Industries, for example, are 60% higher than those of individuals who've gotten a traditional high school equivalency. I'm also proposing a new performance-based program for underskilled adult workers who have a high school degree or its equivalent, but find themselves unprepared for today's changing economy. We're going to propose an effort to repurpose existing resources to ensure that we don't leave any adults behind, even as we reach out for young people that have fallen through the cracks of our system today. Our job is not to improve education at the margins, but to continue to push for success of every Hoosier and to make sure that our children from very early on, throughout their K-12 experience, and even should they falter at the finish line of that K-12 experience, that we're making every effort in innovative and fresh ways to bring them back up and help them lay a foundation for success in their future. And that's why we're bringing forward the proposals that we have today. We need to do all we can, I believe, to make the IN in innovation stand for Indiana when it comes to education. We need to do all we can to bring the best ideas and renewed energy to reach out and make sure that our schools work for all of our kids, regardless of where they start in life and regardless of where they want to start in life. And that's my ambition as your governor. Now, we need to do this in a fiscally responsible way, and with members of the General Assembly here, I'm sure that we will. We need to be accountable. It needs to be driven by performance and outcomes, and this we will do as well. We'll do all this tirelessly with a boundless dedication to all of our kids. Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft and a plain-spoken man, if there ever was one, said, quote, "Until we're educating every kid in a fantastic way, there's no shortage of things to do." Well, I would submit to you today that I couldn't agree with that more. And the truth is, we're not yet educating every Hoosier kid in a fantastic way. So I believe we need to do more. We need to lean into this effort and focus on our kids. That's why I think we need to pursue bold objectives, even in this so-called short session of the Indiana General Assembly. We need to encourage innovation and entrepreneurship among our teachers. We need to create incentives for the best charter operators to come to Indiana. We need to free up unused properties so that more education, innovation, and supply can be available. And we need to create more opportunities for kids in a tough spot, whether they're 4 years old or 24 years old or even 40. We've got to have a commitment to making sure that education works for all of our citizens. Our focus on education innovation must always be about our children. A good education is power. It's power to succeed, to pursue a dream, to change a life, to make a difference. I'll close where Rhonda began us today and say that, I think of standing in these historic hallways, I think of the extraordinary success of the state of Indiana over our nearly 200-year history. But I also think of my own little family that was drawn to this frontier place. I stood this last summer with our 3 kids who are about your all's age. We stood on the hill overlooking the field where my grandfather's home in Ireland once stood. We looked off to the west to see the Ox Mountains, and I remember the story of my great-grandmother and my grandfather's conversation when he, about your age, didn't want to go to America with a one-way boat ticket. And he's asked his mother, he said, "Why do I have to go?" And she said, "Because there's a future there for you." Well, they didn't know there was a place like Indiana. They didn't know that in the first state capital, decades before, people had made a commitment, the first ever constitutional commitment to free public education for all. But she knew about America. She put him on the boat. He came over, he went through Ellis Island. He drove a bus for 40 years in Chicago, Illinois. He raised my mom. She married a fast-talking salesman who made his way down to southern Indiana and raised a family. But all throughout my life, I was told again and again that it's all about education, because here in America, there's something true that's not true everywhere in the world. And that is, if you work hard, you get a good education, you live under the law, anybody can be anybody. This is the place where dreams come true. And education and right choices is the foundation of making your dreams come true. This is a place where the dream of Indiana was born. And I thought, as we call upon policymakers of every stripe from every corner of this state to renew our commitment to education innovation here in the Hoosier State, there'd be no better place to do it than where the dream of Indiana began. Here's to the future, standing among the past. Let's make it work for all our kids. Thank you all very much, and God bless you. Wonderful to be here. Thanks, guys. Good job. Good job.